Today, we're going to talk about something pretty incredible. The story of a single woman armed with a single book who took on the might of an entire industry. And in the process, well, she kicked off the modern environmental movement as we know it. This is the story of Rachel Carson and how she found a voice for a spring that had fallen silent. But here's the thing. Before she was hailed as a hero, she was attacked. And I mean viciously attacked. When her book, Silent Spring, was published, the powerful chemical industry didn't just disagree with her. No, they tried to completely destroy her reputation. They called her a hysterical woman, a fanatic, basically a crazy bird lover who was trying to drag America back to the Dark Ages. So that really raises the big question, doesn't it? How did one book, just one book, provoke this massive multi-million-dollar campaign to ruin its author? What on earth did Rachel Carson write that was so dangerous, so threatening to the powers that be? All right, let's get into it. To really get what this fight was all about, you first have to understand the person at the center of it. See, the industry desperately tried to paint her as some kind of amateur, emotional alarmist. But the truth? The truth is that Rachel Carson was an accomplished, highly respected scientist long before this whole storm ever started. I mean, just look at this resume. She graduated with top honors in biology, earned a master's degree from one of the best universities in the world, Johns Hopkins. She then broke gender barriers to get a professional job in the federal government. And by 1949, she was the editor-in-chief for the entire U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So the person they were trying to paint as a quack was actually a top-tier professional at the peak of her field.
And as if that wasn't enough, on top of her career as a scientist, she was a literary superstar. Her books about the ocean, known as the Sea Trilogy, were huge bestsellers. The Sea Around Us was on the New York Times bestseller list for 81 weeks. It won the National Book Award. This is what makes the later attacks so wild. The woman they called a hysterical crank was actually one of America's most celebrated and trusted voices on the natural world.
Okay, so let's turn to the book that lit the fuse. What was the actual science in Silent Spring that caused such an explosion? Well, it started with a single brilliant word. She refused to call these new synthetic chemicals pesticides. She called them biocides. Think about that. Not sides for pests, but sides for bio, for life itself. She argued that was the only honest term, because their poison was never, ever just limited to the insects they were targeting. And this is how she broke down her case. She laid out this simple but absolutely terrifying chain of events. First, she explained, these chemicals don't just disappear. They stick around in the soil and water for decades. Second, when an animal ingests them, the chemicals get stored in their fatty tissues and just build up over time. And then, and this is the real knockout punch, as smaller creatures are eaten by bigger ones, those poisons become more and more concentrated as they move up the food chain. And this wasn't just an abstract theory. No, she named names. She pointed the finger at DDT, showing how it was causing the eggshells of iconic birds like the bald eagle to become so thin that they'd shatter before the chicks could hatch. She talked about dieldrin, a chemical she pointed out was 50, that's 50, times more toxic than DDT and was causing massive bird die-offs. But here's where she made her argument truly revolutionary. She said this wasn't just about birds or fish. She framed it as an issue of human rights. Regular people, citizens, were being exposed to these poisons in their food, in their water, without their knowledge and without their consent. It was a moral outrage. So when you make an argument that powerful, you can bet the reaction is going to be intense. Let's look at the incredible backlash she faced and how, in the end, she was proven right. The chemical industry just unleashed everything they had. They threatened to sue her publisher into oblivion. A major trade association spent what was then a fortune on a PR campaign to discredit her science. They even published parodies of her book. And the personal attacks were just relentless. But the most incredible, heartbreaking part of this story? She endured all of it while she was privately, secretly battling the very aggressive breast cancer that would ultimately take her life. But here's the thing. They couldn't stop the truth. Her message got through. It reached the highest office in the land. When a journalist asked President John F. Kennedy if the government was going to look into the dangers of pesticides, his answer said it all. He just said, since Miss Carson's book, they already are. And that presidential investigation, it led to a total revolution in policy. In 1963, a White House report came out that officially validated her research. Her work was the direct inspiration for the creation of the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, in 1970. And then, in 1972, the big one.
The federal government banned the agricultural use of DDT. Her book didn't just change minds, it changed the law. Now, you might hear a modern criticism of Carson, that because she got DDT banned, she's somehow responsible for millions of malaria deaths. But when you dig into the historical facts, it's a lot more complicated. For one, the EPA ban was only for agricultural use in the US, and it always had exceptions for public health emergencies. But the bigger issue really was that mosquitoes were already becoming resistant to DDT, thanks to its massive overuse in farming, which ironically is an outcome Carson herself warned about in her book.
You know, beyond all the laws and the controversies, Rachel Carson's most important legacy might actually be something a bit deeper, a change in how we see ourselves in the world.
This quote, from a short book of hers that was published after she passed away, I think it really gets to the heart of everything. She believed that all of it, the science, the advocacy, the fight, it all had to start with a simple, shared sense of wonder. Her fierce opposition to poison came from a deep, abiding love for life. And that, right there, is her greatest gift to us. It's a total shift in perspective. Before Silent Spring, the prevailing idea was that humanity's job was to conquer and control nature. Carson taught us something profound. We are not the masters of nature. We are just one small and very vulnerable part of it.
So I'll leave you with this thought. Rachel Carson taught an entire generation to listen for a specific silence, the absence of birdsong in the spring. Her legacy really challenges us to ask ourselves, right here, right now, what silence do we need to be listening for today?